Good morning. This morning we're going to talk about commitment. John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. John 12, 1 through 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus has raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, the treasurer, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Commitment. Couple aspects of commitment. 1, vulnerability. 2, risk. 3, limiting your options. Think about family. Think about your spouse. Think about even your job. Risk, vulnerability, limiting your options. Took a risk choosing a spouse. Took a risk deciding to have kids. Took a risk where you even wanted to move to. Big risk in many ways. You limited your options. Are you going to go golfing this afternoon, or are you going to spend time with the kids, the spouse? Thinking through vulnerability, risk, limiting options. Vulnerability. Are you coming home from work? Not just offloading, but being vulnerable with your husband, with your wife, about your struggles at work, about your struggles perhaps in the relationship, not just turning a romantic, loving marriage into a partnership, which we see way too often in this day and age. There's not real commitment there because there's not vulnerability, risk, and limiting your very options. Not too long ago, there was a teenage boy in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who had cancer. And he was in the hospital for weeks and weeks doing chemotherapy. And he wasn't so much afraid of the cancer. He was way more so afraid of losing his hair and, just as a teenage boy, going back to school with no hair and the embarrassment of it. Tried on wigs, did not like wigs. And when his mom drove him home, the car ride was painful. He was just getting more and more petrified. But when he walked in the front door, to his incredible delight and shock, the lights turned on and there was a ton of yelling. 50 of his closest friends all had shaved, even bicked their heads in order to show commitment to him. Vulnerability, took some risk. They definitely limited their options with their hair to show a type of commitment to that boy who was struggling with cancer. So, what is commitment? The 3 things we just mentioned. It's a promise that means you remove all these other options. You choose one option and you stick to it no matter what. We all know the story of limiting our options when it comes to the invite, say, to the movies. Maybe it's a movie we don't even really want to go to, but hey, it was a friend who invited me, so I'll say yes. But I'm going to say yes, say on Thursday if the movie's on Friday night, just in case other options pop up, better options. And I'll say yes to that option so I can break this commitment because this one excites me more. Okay, a trivial example, and yet an example that we probably should reflect on in terms of what does commitment to friendship looks like, and what about just commitment with our very word. Commitment statistics in the US are not too good right now. Not too good. 1 in 5 adults, for example, say that they don't really need church. Don't really need church in order to stay spiritually committed. Okay, here's something dastardly, though, that we're going to get from this passage, and that is, it's impossible to have a relationship with Jesus unless you are fully committed. And you say, whoa, well, hold on here. All right, radical. It's a little fundamentalist. It's a little over the top. I thought we could just kind of, pray to Jesus every now and then, especially if we got a big business conference coming up, or maybe if I'm in a tussle with somebody at work, or I'm suffering in some kind of way. But no, we're going to get through Mary of Bethany here, a radical example of tremendous commitment, and that's how the relationship grows. And we're going to have this in really almost disturbing counterexample to the other extreme of what commitment is not through Judas, who is supposed to be one of Jesus' closest friends and allies. Whoever is most obedient is most committed. That type of thinking actually is wrong. And we say, phew. But we shouldn't be saying phew because that means somehow we can be less obedient. No, what it saves us from is we're not supposed to work out a type of obedience that leads to, I'm better than that person spiritually, and I can stand on my own 2 feet because I'm this perfect Christian. And so that means real commitment. No, the more obedient person is not necessarily the more committed person. Yes, obedience comes out of putting Christ first, and it should, and that's a big part of our relationship with Christ. But it primarily instead says right from the get-go, you will be number one in my life, Lord. You will be number one in my life, Lord. And waking up every morning praying that is a good way to start it. And it's a good way to remember it on a daily basis. Full commitment with Christ is going to give you what just occasional semi-commitment cannot give you with Christ. Because you can't have a real vibrant relationship with somebody if you're not spending time with them. We all know this. It's impossible to. You can have the really trivial relationship with them. But when we read in John 10:10 that Jesus has come to give us life and life to the full, that fullness of life only comes when we are radically committed to him. We take risks. We're vulnerable. We limit our options. We want to grow in intimacy and love, which is what Mary is going to show us here in a moment. It's not easy, though. It is not easy. Let's be honest. We could just sit here this morning and think about, hey, yeah, I'll become very committed. I'll put him first. I'll limit all my options. I'll become more risky and more vulnerable. But no, it's not that easy. Think about Luke chapter 9, verses 59 and 61. A few different men say to Jesus, oh, I'll follow you, but first, let me go and bury my father. But first, let me go and say bye-bye to my family. And Jesus says, nope, you guys are not getting it. Jesus was all for family and all for burying loved ones. That's not the point. But he's calling them to a type of radical commitment where he is the number one option. It's radical, tremendously radical. So what are some obstacles, though, to commitment? What are some of your obstacles? Mine are twofold. One, intellectual questions. That's always been one of mine. And then two, lifestyle. So one, intellectual questions. I used to doubt in a really unhealthy kind of way. Any type of doubt would pop into my mind, and I'd say, oh gosh, does God really exist? Or does he really have my best for me? Or is there really a heaven? Or what about all those people who haven't heard of Christ? I mean, come on, God, that's not right. Are they actually going to hell? Unhealthy doubting. Healthy doubting is doubting those doubts that come. Healthy doubting is also working through those doubts, allowing them to push you closer to Christ. Healthy doubting is what David, even Job at times, sometimes Peter did, in asking questions and saying, why are you allowing me to go through this, Christ? But if that unhealthy questioning is consistent, and it just goes over and over again, like a dripping faucet, then that gets in the way of radical commitment to Christ, radical faith that he calls us to. And then secondly, lifestyle. J.D. Salinger, if you remember in high school, probably reading his book, Catcher in the Rye, he was phenomenally consistent in his thinking. He was not a hypocrite when it came to thinking through putting his faith in Christ or not. He actually said that, I don't think I can live out that lifestyle. So no, part of me wants to become a Christian because I know there are many smart Christians out there, and it makes a lot of sense, but I can't live up to that lifestyle. Now, he didn't fully understand grace, but he was consistent in saying, hey, if I'm going to live a very promiscuous life, if I'm not going to obey Christ in any areas, I can't call myself a Christian. So he was against cultural Christianity. It's honesty right there. Now, dignity versus honor. Here's another one in our culture today. Dignity is the bad one. It's what we have today in the sense of it's all about my own personal happiness. Honor is the very good one, and we see this in other cultures predominantly. In the East, for example, honor is fulfilling a role. So it's I'm a parent, I'm a spouse, I am in a certain place serving others in the workforce. And I'm going after that, loving God first and then loving neighbor. So it's the greatest commandment that the person is hopefully fulfilling. That is honor. Dignity is, I see those roles. I see what honor is. I know a lot of people think they're important. Maybe I kind of think they're important, but no. Dignity is, it's my own personal happiness. I'm only on this planet for so long. I need to sacrifice for myself. And we could think of, for example, the baby's crying upstairs in their crib and has been crying for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And you could have fed the baby 10 minutes previous to when you did. And you go up finally because you wanted to catch 15 more minutes of shut-eye. And the baby is just totally kind of falling apart. Well, that was my own kind of trivial and yet mundane example of living out own personal dignity rather than honor, the role of a good father. We all know it at different times in different ways. Mary is going to show us here the best type of honor role imaginable. So let's go back to the text here. If you look in the first couple verses. So Lazarus, where he lived, that's where they are. We can think about how Lazarus was just raised from the dead back in John chapter 11. And you have Mary, Martha, you have Judas here. And the narrative focus turns to Judas, and it doesn't really include others. Especially, this passage is picked up in the Gospel of Mark as well. You see it mainly there. And I think the gospel writer, the reason why he does this is to show that there's really no neutral position to take on Christ. So the others were really left out, and it's like fully honing in on who is this Judas character. We know who he is. We know what he's going to do. But how does the breakdown start to occur? And you can see Judas's psychology really start to break down. That's obviously connected with his heart. And he is the treasurer. He's got the money bag for the disciples. We know he's doing some hanky-panky with that. And then we know also that most likely when we have here that supposedly Mary did this dastardly wrong thing and she should have given that money to the poor, Judas says, we know that he was going to pocket that money, most likely. Come on, let's be real here. He was not saying that money is actually going to the poor. And so you see this type of psychology, this breakdown, and we could think back early on in the ministry with Jesus. He was definitely one of these thinking, okay, here comes this radical Messiah who's going to save us from the Romans. Here comes this radical Messiah who's going to get me to the power position, the fame, maybe even the money that I really want, that I need. But he sees that, hold on, slowly and slowly, this is not what he is here for. He's here for the poor. He's here for the oppressed. He's here for the prostitutes, the whoremongers, even the Pharisees, the tax collectors. This is not my guy. This is not my guy at all. He's not fulfilling my expectations whatsoever. And when that happens, he gets bored. He gets cynical. He falls in love with money. And then he's ready to sacrifice one of his closest friends. As opposed to Mary. If you look at Mary in Luke 10, John 11, and then here in John 12. Remember in Luke 10, you got Martha and Mary preparing for Jesus to come. And this week, we had some friends over, and I knew the anxiety that was going to occur, and so did my wife, in cleaning up the apartment right before they came over, especially the hour before. And we were torn to pieces in this anxiety, just like Martha. That's the only place where you get in the Gospels torn to pieces with anxiety, and that was what is happening to Martha here. And what do you get with Mary, though? Sitting at Jesus' feet. This is crucial. Sitting at Jesus' feet means she's being taught, learning, regurgitating what she's being taught. So she's mulling it over, thinking about it, getting it from her head. The quarter is dropping from the gumball machine all the way down into the heart. Then you get it clearly showing up in John 11, that it truly had sunk down into the heart. You don't get it with Martha, because again, here comes Jesus to raise his best friend from the dead. But whoa, Jesus, you missed the boat. You are late. Why are you here so late? He's dead, he's done, he's gone. Martha starts by saying that. Jesus says, what? I am the resurrection and the life. And that was no real nice, soft way of saying that. He hits her right between the eyes in saying that. And then Mary comes, though, and asks a similar question. And yet Jesus weeps with her. in intimacy, in love. Why? Because she had been sitting at his feet, learning from him, rather than just finding, oh, here come the other options. Here come the options. I could clean here. I could people please there. I could go golfing here. I could go shopping there. And then maybe I'll get to the point of spending some time at Jesus' feet, say once a month. That's the difference between a Mary and a Martha. Sit at Jesus' feet if you want to become committed to him and if you actually want to see the benefits that he's going to show you by being committed and having this loving relationship with him. So Mary is obviously willing to totally embarrass herself. This ties me into asking the question, am I prideful? Are you prideful? And it's so easy to think, no, I'm not really prideful. I mean, maybe I gossip some. Maybe I'm occasionally defensive. Maybe I sometimes brag. So those are 3 areas, perhaps. But one here that Mary clues us into is she is so willing to just embarrass herself, and it's beyond embarrassment, by washing Jesus' feet, that shows zero pride. It shows incredible humility. If we are not sharing our faith in some type of way, if we are tremendously shy or just don't want to embarrass ourselves ever, that actually shows pride. It shows a level of pride. And that can start to clue us into, okay, how am I being vulnerable? How am I risk-taking? How am I limiting my options even? Perhaps we no longer will be invited to certain parties. I know this is true for a handful of you here at Grace. It's been true for me as well. Those weird Christians, let's definitely not have them back. They were asking kind of some tough questions, a little too metaphysical, a little too strange. And yet that's what Mary is willing to do. So, feet washing. In that day and age, people were walking almost 12 miles, about 11, 12 miles on average a day. Think about the sweaty feet, clammy feet. Think about how dusty and smelly they truly are. You're supposed to have some amount of perfume in the house when the person walks in because the smell, the stench was that bad with guests coming in. Slaves were supposed to wash the feet. Mary says, I'm going to debase myself to the place of a slave. I'm going to wash your feet, Jesus. What about letting down the hair? You weren't supposed to let down the hair if you were a woman in that day and age, in the Middle East especially. You could be killed for that. It's such a huge mistake, Mary. What are you doing? And yet, instead of taking a towel and a wash basin, she takes her hair and her tears to wash Jesus' feet. Incredible act of commitment and love. She takes this box, though. It's not just her tears. It's also this box, this family heirloom that's worth probably over a year's worth of wages, 300 denarii. Women, men, you probably have some perfume and cologne, perhaps as you paid more for than you would have really liked. But I doubt it's worth a year's wages. And yet that is what Mary is willing to drop on Jesus to show her love, intimacy, and commitment to him. And you say, why? Is this just a showy thing? Is she just being kind of ostentatious here? No, because we're going to find out, she knows where Jesus is going. She doesn't know all the details, but she has a hint. She knows what her friends were doing there in John chapter 11 at Lazarus' grave when they saw what happened and they went and started reporting to the Pharisees, hey, this is what this man just did. And the Pharisees say, oh, thank you for telling us he needs to die. She is getting into, wow, I can't believe my friends did that in John chapter 11. They just did that. I know he is going somewhere. He will be sacrificed. She's getting clued into this incredible commitment that Jesus has for her, has for all of us. And that is so attractive to her that she's willing to make a fool of herself, a total fool of herself. So Judas objects. We see this. Again, he has the money purse. He's saying, come on, let's give it to the poor. Jesus says, no, you'll always have the poor. You think, Jesus, wow, you're against the poor? Nope. He's definitely not against the poor. If you go back to Mark, actually, again, you have this crowd, and in the Greek, it says they are snorting in anger with what Mary is doing here with this perfume, her tears, and washing Jesus' feet. So it wasn't just this like, whoa, weirdo. It was actually some of these men at Lazarus' home actually snorting in anger, literally wanting to throw her across the room for doing this. But you have Jesus here. Jesus, again, he's saying, you'll always have the poor. Obviously, he's not demeaning the poor in any kind of way. Think about the Sermon on the Mount. He is here, he was here, and he still is here today, first and foremost, for the spiritually poor and the physically poor. That is who he's chasing after. Look at Luke chapter 12, for example. And once we understand that, then we can say, okay, we know the background. We know who Jesus is. So why does he say this? And what's with Mary? What's the connection here? He is celebrating Mary for what she's doing, for this simple act of incredible gratitude and love for what he's going to do. And he says this singularity of focus is exactly what a follower of mine, that's what I want. That's what's best for them. And so he applauds her for that, even to the extent of saying, no, right now, that's more important than taking this money and going and helping the poor in this very moment. So we can start to gather then this writing on the wall that Mary sees and that others were given the hint to over and over again, and yet they were so slow of heart to get. And a lot of that we could say was pride. A lot of that we could say was distraction. A lot of that we could say was, whoa, familiarity. This is just a good buddy. I know he sometimes gets a little strange and says that he's the Messiah, but I mean, come on. Maybe that's a little bit of mania. We don't really know what that is. So thirdly, how can we grow in commitment? One, ask the question, where's your heart? Matthew 6:21, for where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. Crucial to ask yourself on a regular basis, where is my heart ultimately? See, we could say we're Christians, and we could go by doctrine, and we believe this, we have faith in this, and yes, I show up to church here. But psychologists actually say that if you are truly going to act in a certain way, it's not what you believe, it's not what you think, it's actually what you love most that will propel you to act in a certain way. And so that's why in commitment, we could say your heart is the most important thing. It's the bedrock of who you are as a person. And if you love Christ the most, rather than just, oh, I think I have faith and I do good works, but instead if you fall in love with him more, that is how you get committed to him. And it's by looking at the cross. It's not just by saying I have beliefs and I understand doctrines, I understand the Lord's Prayer, I understand Paul's creeds. That is crucial to ask yourself, where is my heart today, tomorrow, where will it be? I remember not too long ago, I was having a conversation with an atheist on his YouTube channel. He was very cynical about just about everything. His biggest issue was actually Christians' take in the Old Testament on circumcision. It was very strange. And yet, one point stuck out to me that he kept asking me. He was like, hey man, it's really cool you're a Christian. I'm an atheist, but you just get good inspiration from your Christian faith, right? You know, it kind of carries you around. It's like a rock concert. You know, you get those good vibes, and that just kind of carries you. And, you know, you get the hit of dopamine. And I said, well, actually, that's not quite fully it. I mean, maybe that's a small part of it, but no, it's actually understanding that this was a historical event, Jesus' death that we're eventually going to get to here, and his resurrection actually occurred. There were Christians, thousands of Christians, before the Bible was even written because they saw this historical event. And then we fall in love with it. We fall in love with Christ and what he did for us. So we believe and then fall in love because of his tremendous sacrifice for even his enemies. Our culture oftentimes just thinks, oh, it's good inspiration. Go to church, get inspired, get a little bit of powder puff type feelings, and that's about it. But no, we have an incredible opportunity to show commitment, risk, vulnerability, limiting options in the workplace, in our families, with our friends, at church, in a way that will stick out to the culture. I've heard it many different times. Secular people say, whoa, why is that person committed? Whoa, why does that Christian behave that kind of way? Seems really radical. That's the opportunity because it also has that evangelistic dynamic to it. This one is very important, tremendously important, especially for kids. So parents, here's one that we want to memorize even for our kids. It's for all of us really, but especially kids. Because with mass media with technology, social media, advertising, you name it, especially in Fairfield County, it's definitely heightened. How are you going to teach your kids to become committed followers of Christ? That's tremendously hard. Reading Bible stories at night is a great start, but as they get older, it's going to have to be most likely more than that. Here are a couple ways. Find out the defeater narratives, so the stories that your culture is telling you. So not just the distractions of social media, that's a big one in and of itself. But here are some of those stories that culture tells us. It's telling your kids right now, even through cartoons that they're watching. One is you need to be yourself. Just be yourself. Be your authentic self. Don't try to be anybody else. You set your own standards. And then secondly, whatever is true for you is true for you. Don't let your parents really tell you what's true. Definitely don't let the cops tell you what's true. What is true for you is true for you, and don't let anybody judge you by their standard of truth. And then the third one is sexuality. We all know the name Sigmund Freud, and we are living off his fumes even still today. He is the one who had the sick Freudian complex type theory, and he's also the one who said, by you Christians saying that we shouldn't instinctually go about sleeping around and having sex with whoever we want, you are harming our psychology and our bodies. It should be all about us. All about us. It shouldn't be about marrying somebody and having to stay faithful and committed to them. That's unhealthy. And we still, even if it's on a subconscious level, live this out, and our kids learn it from a very early age. Calling it out, calling these three out, again, it's you need to be yourself at whatever the cost, your authentic self. 2, whatever is true for you, it's true for you. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And then 3, your sexual instincts, live them out. Have total free license just to live them out. Kenny Bop. Last night I was reflecting some on my friendship with Kenny Bop. I was listening to Andrea Bocelli, so I feel like he was the reason why some of my tears came. That's my excuse. And but just the commitment level. I mean, I got very fortunate because I think one of his greatest character traits is commitment. I mean, the man is insanely committed. I see it in his marriage. I got to see it with working with him endlessly, watching him. Pat already named some of them. Drive some of the single men in our congregation hours and hours, be on the phone with them for hours and hours, smash through glass with firemen to get to Richard Provost. The level of commitment he has and had to the people here at Grace Church is bar none. Think of missions trips. There's some funny stories there, but they're above PG, so I better not share them. And the guy is just phenomenal. I think of being on the basketball court with him. Selfless. Again, humility is a huge part of commitment. And his humility on the court, he'd be the first one to take all the body blows in setting screens for anybody. Even if it was a gym class hero like myself, who was a total ball hog, or a Cliff maybe, who wanted to get all the shots, Ken would say, okay, fine. I'll take all the body blows, the elbows, to set you a screen so that you could get open for your jump shot and get the glory. So that is exactly who Ken is as a person, shown in his marriage, shown in his job, even shown on the basketball court. And that's who we are to be in those areas, and especially our relationship to God, which Ken definitely had as well. So, understanding what is commitment, taking risk, being vulnerable, limiting the option. Secondly, Mary. How is she such a great example for us, model for us in commitment? Well, she was willing to totally embarrass herself. She was willing to sacrifice her reputation completely. She was willing to get down in the dirt, and waste a ton of money to love Christ more because of what he would ultimately do for her. And then finally, how do we grow in commitment? Constantly enter back into asking the question, where is my heart? Where is my heart? Where is it really the ultimate allegiance of it? Not just faith and doctrine, but what is my heart really gravitating towards? And then things like thankfulness as well, gratitude. It's brought up 38 times in the Bible. Thank, thank, thank. I got out this week, a very slow jog, but out in nature, and then also late at night, a few nights in a row, just to thank God under the stars. And for me, it is impossible not to grow in love for God and just a healthy faith when you see that expanse, knowing it didn't just come about from nothing by chance, but knowing that God not only exists but loves us intimately. That starts to grow us in commitment to Him, and then that flows naturally into commitment with others. Let's pray together.